In chapter 12, the Revelation introduced us to the principal players during the tribulation period, and those were Israel, Satan, Christ, the archangel, and then the godly remnant. Now in chapter 13, John presents another part of the historical prophecy, and this concerns the images of the tribulation rulers. Now these who will now come on the scene are human rulers that are identified as the beast which comes out of the sea, and then the beast arising from the earth. Now these two are human agents of Satan, and he uses them to oversee his plan throughout the Great Tribulation period. And what we'll be viewing here first is imagery of a governmental system that will exercise worldwide control, but the emphasis of the chapter is the evil force that's driving it all. The system engaged rests with two rulers who are emissaries of Satan himself. The first person John introduces is the Antichrist, this beast coming from the sea. And I stood on the sand of the sea, and I saw a beast coming up out of the sea, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and on its horns were 10 crowns, and on its heads was the name of blasphemy. And the beast which I saw was like a leopard, and its feet like those of a bear, and its mouth like the mouth of a lion. And the dragon gave him its power, and its seed, and great authority. Now obviously we have expressions of symbolism here which describes this person and his power. Now this is the Antichrist, the one who will head the political system, and he's going to oppose God and everything that's God-centered. Now we've seen already in chapter 12 that the great red dragon is set to destroy Christ as he comes on the scene. So here we have this ruler of Satan's political system set to fight against Christ. He's the Antichrist, this one who is against Christ. Everything this ruler will do, along with the political machine that he heads, will attempt to defeat Christ and his mission. Now within this vision, John observes from the shoreline a beast arising from the sea. Now the fact that this person arises from the sea indicates his origin. It's a person, but also representative of the governmental system that also arises from the sea with him. Now some take this statement to be that he is coming out of the sea or mass of humanity and is therefore a Gentile. Others take it to be a reference to his rise from the Mediterranean. Now, we'd probably not be too far off to combine the ideas that the Antichrist will likely be an influential Gentile whose government also arises from the Mediterranean area. The description of this beast is that of 7 heads, 10 horns with 10 crowns, with the name of blasphemy attached to the head. Now, with this being a political system, the 7 heads would be 7 kingdoms which have 10 kings. And these monarchs have ruling crowns, and that means that they're politically enabled to submit their realms to the control of the Antichrist. And of course, all that these will do along with the Antichrist is that of blasphemy, every one of them. Again, 7 kingdoms, which have 10 kings ruling over those kingdoms, and these kings have the right, or the crown, to lead their already blasphemous realms in submission to the control of the Antichrist. So in effect, they're all submitting to Satan's plan. Now in verse 2, the beast is further described as being as a leopard, which emphasizes swiftness. His feet are like those of a bear, and this indicates most likely his strength and tenacity. His mouth, like that of a lion, suggests his majesty, power, and I think likely vocal prowess. And verse 2 also leaves no doubt where this person and system gets its power. It mentions there about the dragon gave him his power and his seed and great authority. Now we know that the great red dragon of chapter 12 is the devil himself, so it appears that the mentioning of these 3 animal characteristics is a description of the character of this end-time system, one that will be difficult to withstand. And with such force exhibited globally, there's a waiting world gladly following that which is against Christ, and they worshipfully follow Antichrist. Then we see the world's reaction to the beast in verses 3 and 4. And I saw one of its heads as having been slain to death, and its deadly wound was healed. And all the earth marveled after the beast. And they worshiped the dragon, who gave authority to the beast. And they worshiped the beast, saying, who is like the beast, who is able to make war with it. Now, the world's reaction to the beast is that of marveling at its revived state, which results in worship of both the dragon that gives the beast power as well as to the beast itself. Now, one of the heads of the beast appears to have been slain but revives from the fatal blow. Now, remember that we're talking likely about a political and governmental system. There's a couple of thoughts to consider here. Now, first, the death and the seeming resurrection seem to parallel that of the Lamb in Revelation 5. Of course, this wouldn't be the first time Satan attempts to mimic something that's true of God. Now, regardless, some want to suggest that a past historical figure has in some way come back to life, and some suggestions are someone like Nero or Judas or Hitler or Stalin or many others that might have come on the scene over time that have had evil powers. However, since the power of life and resurrection are not within Lucifer's abilities, such doesn't seem really possible. Rather than this, and secondly, many good commentators suggest that this event is a revival of the pagan Roman Empire in some fashion. An entire godless political system has long since believed to be dead, but in the end times comes back to life. The deadly wound appears all but healed, and such a resurrection back to life amazes and intrigues the world. There's no mention about the horn or the crown on the horn, only one of the heads. Now again, this suggests that a political system as a whole is most likely meant and is here revived. And then in verse 4, the world marvels at the resurrection of this ancient rule. It's like with amazement and pleasure, a world already bent on forsaking God looks at this political prospect as being a global blessing. Oh, but it doesn't stop at mere amazement. It extends to levels of worship. And this is something that Satan has wanted all along. The world will worship the dragon, that is, the devil, who is the force behind the beast and who gives influence and power to it. Of course, the beast is personified in the Antichrist, and all will turn their attention to him also for that worship, which in turn is worship of the one who's behind it all. Now, Earth's inhabitants, in their worship, propose two questions. Who's like the beast, and who's able to make war with it? Now, their questions show that they believe the head to be invincible. This completes part of Satan's plan to set up a substitute King of Kings and Lord of Lords. It's the Antichrist heading up the revived Roman Empire, which will also be Antichrist in all that it is and all that it does. Now, the point at which this occurs must be at the beginning of the tribulation period, because it'll be at that time that he arises to acceptance and that he has no serious contenders for headship, and that he positions himself then to take the throne. Now, he has, from the beginning of this period, control over the whole world. And although the world doesn't believe that there's any greater than the beast, they're going to find out the answer as the Lamb comes on the scene later. And all of this is especially dealing with the beginning of the Great Tribulation and even the time of peace he will seemingly bring. Then we see the mouth of the beast in verses 5 and 6. And a mouth speaking great things was given to it, and blasphemies, and authority given to it to continue 42 months. And it opened its mouth in blasphemy toward God, to blaspheme his name and his tabernacle and those dwelling in heaven. Because the beast is against Christ, his words serve to blaspheme through the Antichrist, which appears to be the mouth of the beast. And what we have just read here in Revelation about this parallel, also something that Daniel states. I considered the horns, and behold, there came up among them another little horn, before whom there were 3 of the first horns plucked up by the roots. And behold, in this horn were eyes like the eyes of a man, and a mouth speaking great things. I beheld then, because of the voice of the great words which the horn spake, I beheld even till the beast was slain, and his body destroyed, and given to the burning flame. And he shall speak great words against the Most High, and shall wear out the saints of the Most High, and think to change times and laws. And they shall be given into his hand until a time and times, and the dividing of time. Now the blasphemous emphasis is to continue 42 months, or 3.5 years. It's not that Antichrist arises during this time, but that in position he continues during this time. And since we're talking about the beginning of the tribulation period, which includes his time of acceptance, it appears that he arrives on the scene at the beginning of the 7-year tribulation period, and that will be the time that he enters a special covenant with the Jewish people. His rule over all world nations, however, doesn't start until the middle of the period. And from that point, he will rule for the 42 months until the end of the tribulation period. Of course, this end of his reign, at the conclusion of the 42 months, will be with Christ's second coming. Now, as it concerns the Antichrist's blasphemy, as expressed in verse 8 of our text, it's not a side note or a passing reference. It's a fundamental characteristic of his thoughts, his expressions, and, by the way, it's part of his governmental rule. See how far the range of blasphemies go. First, it's against God's person himself, so this is a personal attack against God. Never mistake that this battle for Lucifer is a personal battle. And next, it extends to desecrate God's name through cursings. Oh, but it doesn't stop there. The Antichrist will demean the house of God and all that would take place there. But for this evil person, not even those dead and in the presence of God are immune from his rantings of hatred and defilement. The Antichrist hates God on all levels, and he'll feel the freedom in the world to express it and to advance his hatred for God. And I think we can see that this is exactly the spirit of the devil himself in all of it. And he's building not only a system politically that matches that spirit, but also an entire world of followers to the same. The next most logical step for such a spirit and such a political system is no longer mere words, but a push to extinguish all things that are Christian. And that's going to come in the form of an all-out war. And it's a war that's spiritual at its core, that eventually spills over into a political, physical warfare. And so we see next the war engendered by the beast in verses 7 through 9. And it was given to it to war with the saints and to overcome them. And authority was given to it over every tribe and tongues and nation. And all dwelling on the earth will worship it, those whose names have not been written in the book of life of the Lamb slain from the foundation of the world. If any man has an ear, let him hear. It's a little disconcerting that the saints of God will be subjected to the warring onslaught of the beast and to be overcome by it. But we have to remember that believers of all time have never been spared the heartache of bad times nor of sin's natural consequence. Over many hundreds of years, there have been martyrs for Christ, and it's no different here during this period. The point will be that as God completes his will in their lives, he will allow some believers to glorify him with their ultimate sacrifice. They will have opportunity to show their greatest love for him regardless of the cost. As the Antichrist is given the power over all tribes, tongues, and nations, here again is Satan's counterfeit of Christ's millennial reign. But even with this taking place, the devil's attempt to imitate Christ is only a masquerade at best. Lucifer's playing dress up here, but he doesn't have the substance to sustain it. He's soon and going to be shamelessly defeated. Now, the reference in verse 8 concerning all that dwell on the earth really can't refer to the believers, because verse 7 already indicates that they're at constant war against the beast and the Antichrist. Additionally, all those in the world worshiping the beast are those who don't have their names written in the book of life. Once again, and of course, it concerns a list of those tied to the redemptive sacrificial lamb who has made possible for their names to be present in the book. An unbelieving world is lining up and becoming aligned with the beast. The believers, on the other hand, already belong to the Lamb that's slain from the foundation of the world. Their names are already recorded on whose side they're on. And from eternity past to that very moment, the Lord knows who would be his, and that's not changing. What's at war here is a world-accepted ecumenical religion that only true believers will oppose. This will set them up for persecution worldwide and a religious war. Then, to conclude this point, a significant statement is made: if any man have an ear, let him hear. Now, this is similar to the statement that Jesus made to the 7 churches at the beginning of the book. But here it's a broad statement for anyone, anywhere, and really at any time. This is a point of truth that must be understood and accepted. It's another support that the church is raptured at this point, and I personally can't help but think that these words are specifically for those living during the Great Tribulation time. It's an attempt to make them think seriously about what's happening around them so that they will accept the truth of the gospel and confirm their name in the Lamb's Book of Life. And then in verse 10 we see the patience of the saints. He who leads into captivity will go into captivity. If anyone will kill with the sword, he must be killed by the sword. Here is the patience and the faith of the saints. This verse holds hope for all believers, and it speaks of divine retribution. God doesn't turn his head away from his children, and he'll not fail in making everything right. Within this one statement are both reassurance to the believer and warning to the persecutor, especially in those days of the tribulation period. If one serves the beast and takes saints captive, he himself shall receive the same. Those who kill the saints with the sword, that is, by warfare, will find that they'll die in the same way. And ultimately, this comes back on the Antichrist as well. The patience and faith of the saints come in as they understand that retribution is always in the hand of the Lord, and he'll be the one to repay. Believers, regardless of the circumstances, have to have their trust in the Lord and patience with God to make all things right. And this God will do. In this message, we've seen the first dominant ruler of the last days, the Antichrist. He's the head of a political machine pushed and empowered by the devil himself for the purpose of defeating all that's associated with God. But as much as this will be the force of the last days, the spirit of Antichrist is already present around us today. Satan doesn't wait until the second half of the tribulation period to stand against and to fight against Jesus. That he's already doing right now, and he's as close in doing that as where we live right now. So please don't go away from this message today thinking that this is something only for those nameless individuals who live at the tribulation time of the last days. However, like the saints of the last days, make sure that your name is written in the Lamb's Book of Life. Make sure that you've called on Jesus to save you from your sins, and also asking him to come into your life as Lord.